Jay?
Hi, I'm Jay Taylor with Warren Berkeley, and this is all about books. Warren and I have a special interest in reading books, and talking about books with others. And tonight we have a guest with us that we're going to talk about books with. Warren, who do we have with us tonight?
Jacob Hudgins. You know, I was just talking to these two guys a moment ago. I met these two guys at a young preacher's workshop, which was about 16 years ago, and I've stayed connected with them. One of the very important things we do about those preachers' workshops in Irving is we stay connected with these guys through the years, and we help each other through the years. And these guys have helped me, and maybe I've helped them in some sort of a way. And I've known Jacob for a long time and have really admired his work generally, but specifically in his writing work. He's done a great deal of good writing, and we are here tonight to talk about Exploring God's Grace, which I think would be the most recent book that Jacob has produced and published, and you can find that on Amazon and at other locations. And somewhere in the course of this episode, we'll put those links up so that you can join us. Jacob, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much, brother. Good to see you both. I think we can't really think of ourselves as young preachers anymore. I think it's been too long. So appreciate you still having a not so young preacher with you.
Well, yeah, I know what you mean. Boy, do I know what you mean. All right, Jay, first question.
Yeah, Jacob, one of the things we like to explore with the people we have on the program is to talk about early reading habits. Were you an early reader? And if so, what books made an impression, impacted your life? So talk with us about that, early reading habits, and maybe some books that left an impression on you.
Sure. Definitely was a reader. My mom was an English teacher, and so always there were books in the house. She always encouraged us to read. I have two older brothers, and so basically whatever crumbs fell off the table of what they were reading, I picked up and read. So usually I remember distinctly going through the Chronicles of Narnia, and that was something that was deeply impressionable on me. We read a lot of science fiction and kind of more fantasy type books growing up. Junior high years, I found The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. This was before all the movies came out, so quite a while back. But just really enjoyed reading for imagination things. As I went to college, I was a history major at Texas A&M, and so we were reading all the time and writing papers, and kind of opened up a new dimension of kind of the academic side. When I started preaching, though, I had some brethren that would tell me that reading was bad for preachers because, you never know what you're going to come across as you read. And I think they were worried I was going to read something and kind of lose my faith or something like that. So it took me a few years really to really develop a love for reading Bible things and Bible scholarship and that sort of thing. But I do a lot of that reading now. So still read some fiction, still enjoy something to kind of have a little escape. But it's just always been a part of my life. And so I definitely from a very young age, I've always been a reader.
Well, what about now as your work as a preacher? You've mentioned the fact that you read quite often, and maybe some books that you're reading now, or books that you read in connection with preaching.
Yeah, one of the cool things, we moved to College Station here a year ago. And so one of the cool things about that, since I'm a former student, I can go to the library and check things out. And so it's a bigger library than one I'm used to dealing with. And so I found some good academic resources with that. I usually like to read something to do with what I'm studying or going to study. So I'm working through, I'm planning on doing some kind of devotional work on the major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. So I'm reading a book that I just found at the A&M library called Isaiah Isaiah Old and New by Ben Witherington, who's a pretty reliably good scholar. And So I also am reading, I'm working on a book about the home. And so I'm reading a book called Take Back Your Family. So there's some books like that that I'll work through knowing I've got something coming up, or, wanting to just do some extra research on the side. I have a little side project that I'm just chewing on about the parables. And so I asked around and found a book called Stories with Intent, which is about that thick. So I'm not really, it's not one I'm working through it slowly. I'll put it that way. But I always like to have a lot of irons in the fire, and if something doesn't pan out, we just move on to something else. But I really, really enjoy that part where I do my own Bible study and I'm looking in the Bible myself, but then, to have a kind of a conversation with some other people, so to speak, by reading about what they think about things. And sometimes I get mad at them and they think they're wrong, but it's always kind of good to get sharper by hearing what other people think about those things.
So you would say that you have a collection of books everywhere. You're just lots of piles.
Yes, I do. I enjoy audiobooks too. So if I find audiobooks, I'll listen that way. So I do a lot of running. If I'm running, I'll listen. And so sometimes I get kind of vocal, and if I own the book, I'll write in the margins if I disagree with something, and kind of have an argument with them in the margins. But yeah, just lots of different things. Got lots of books. They're not always good, but they always stimulate me in one way or another.
Well, before I turn you over to Warren, let me just backtrack to something you said earlier about maybe some who would discourage you from reading. Have you found that that reading helps you as a student, as a preacher, as a writer?
Absolutely, it's helped me in every way. I can understand the tendency, the concern. There's a lot of crazy things out there. I think since I was young, now the internet has become more prominent. There's even more craziness out there. But I would just say, when I have done training younger preachers, I encourage them to read someone who believes the opposite of what you believe, just to hear it in their terms and know what you're dealing with. Because I think it's important to hear even a false teaching in its own terms. But that sharpens me, because as I think through that, I have to be able to say, what would I say to someone who said that to me? So that's helped me. But with writing, yeah, you learn what works and what doesn't work. You develop a feel for good writing, and you see what you don't want to do. Some academic writers are incredibly dense, and it's almost like they're trying to obscure their meanings. And so, it's something where you say, well, I want to write more clearly. I want to do that differently. And so there's just motivation all the different ways for me. So I would say I encourage people to read, but always read with discernment. Always know, be careful, because not everything lines up with scripture. But, if we're Christians and we learn to test all things and hold fast what's good, then I think that reading fits very well into how those ideas can be introduced to us. And if they're good, we keep them. If not, we just throw them out.
All right, Warren.
Tell us about the concept that's involved in this book, Exploring God's Grace. Tell us where you came up with this. I know it's from the Bible, but how you structured this and how you decided to put this together in this fashion.
Sure. When we moved to Little Rock, Arkansas, we wanted to start doing Bible reading as a congregation. And so as we did that, it seemed to me that it would help the group, not just to have, this is what we're reading, but to have a little material to kind of help us process and make some sense of it. So I started writing devotionals, and we would send them out as emails to the church. And so that started in 2016, maybe 2017. I think it was 2017. And we did it for 5 years. Well, in 2021, I was looking for a topic, and I just always had this vision of James 1, verse 17, where it says that every good and perfect gift comes from above, from the Father of lights, with whom there's no shadow of turning. And the concept that every good gift comes from God just made me think there's a lot in that to unpack, if God is laying claim to every good thing we receive. And so just started kind of chewing on that idea in the New Testament and thinking, what could we, if we were to string passages together and read through them for the year, what would we get? And so, I did some searches on grace and gift and blessing and those kinds of words. And then when I expanded that to include the Old Testament, suddenly I had more passages than I could handle even in a year. And so it just became, a project that grew and grew until I knew this is what I need to do to go all the way through from Genesis to Revelation and talk about how God is a giver and how much we receive from God without just focusing in on salvation in the New Testament. Excuse me. So I feel like after I made some of those connections, especially with the wording and then just kind of working my way through the Bible, noticing things, the book kind of wrote itself. It's just obvious how many things that God is saying he has done. When you have eyes for it, you start seeing it everywhere. And so I felt that because grace is such a controversial theological topic, that it would be good to broaden the lens a little bit and say, if we zoom out, there's a lot here that's not controversial, but it's also not something we talk about very often. And so it was a blessing to me, because prior to this study, I would not have thought anything about God's grace in the Old Testament. But once you start studying it and you see how many times God is described as giving and blessing and healing and doing for his people, like I said, you just see it everywhere. So it's really transformed how I think about grace. And I hope that if people go through this as a daily devotional reading, when you do that every day for an entire year, it has an effect on you, and you begin to see your world a little differently. You see that God's at work in everyday things all the time.
Very good. I'll tell you, it's a very important movement when you discover in your study of the scripture that grace is not just a salvation doctrine. It goes to the very core of who God is and who Christ is. And it goes to what we're able to receive. And that word receive is something we all should always connect with grace. Something that we receive by the activity of faith, yes, but we are recipients of such generosity from God. And once you move outside just the idea of a theological concept or a salvation doctrine or a debate, it becomes something that can be very personal for you as an individual. And hopefully we convey that to the people that we serve in our teaching and our preaching. Very good. I tell you, when I read your book, I don't know how many books I've read written by men on the subject of grace. I don't recall any book I've read that had a whole section from the book of Judges. So, your first thought when you look at the table of contents is Judges and grace. That's not a connection that you commonly would make. But I think when you read the Bible as a whole, you're going to see grace. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. You're going to see grace everywhere outside of the book of Romans. Then when you get to the book of Romans, everything you've read about God and his grace before you got to Romans, that's going to help you understand the concept of salvation by grace through faith in the book of Romans. So I really appreciate your work. Tell me something about the structure of the book. This is what is sometimes called a daybook type format. I'll let you describe something about the structure or the format of the book.
Well, each day has its own reading, and I've done other books, other devotional years where it was linear through scripture, and we just went from verse to verse to verse so that you're reading the same section. This is one where you jump around a bit, but I did list the passages in order, in canonical order from Genesis to Revelation. But anyway, we'll have the passage, and then usually my style is to have 2 paragraphs on the text and then one to make an application of the the text and what lesson we're trying to draw. And then I like to close with one thing to think about and one thing to pray for. The think about is usually just a thought question. It's not going to be easily answered. It's intended to be introspective. And the one thing to pray for is obviously a prayer prompt, so that we can then take our thoughts to God and then talk to God about what we're learning about him for the day. So I like the format I stumbled on when I first started this. I didn't want to write so many words that people wouldn't read them. And there is a threshold at which people start tuning out. And one of our members at Fairview in Little Rock came to me and he said, after one particular time, I think it was a little bit shorter, around 300 to 320 words, he came to me and said, that length was just perfect. It's just right. And I thought, that's it. So I just kind of tried to stick to that. Sometimes it goes a little longer because the concepts are a little heavier or there needs more explanation. But most of the time, I could fit it in that small space just to make sure I didn't lose anybody from start to finish. But I enjoy the format. It's a discipline. It forces you into being very concise, very specific. And sometimes that means that you can't say everything you want to say or unpack everything about a concept. But I find that most of the time that's good because you really have to say, this is the most important thing I need to say about this. So I enjoy that. And I kind of like the constraints of the format. When I have more space, I tend to go on and on.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a break right here. And during the break that we take, you're going to see on the screen all the links where you can find this book, and we'll be right back after that. We are back here with Jacob, and we're going to use this time to do what we call a lightning round. Just some very quick questions that will kind of mark the way toward the rest of the episode. Jacob, your favorite Bible translation?
I use the ESV, English Standard Version. I was raised on the New King James, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. So that's a joke for all you New King James lovers out there.
Yeah.
So.
What helped you in the transition from one to the other? Readability?
Yes, I like the readability. I got frustrated with some inconsistencies I saw in New King James, especially Romans 3 and 4, works and deeds. They kept using interchangeably, even though it's the same Greek word. And that text is hard enough without translation difficulty. So it was an emotional decision. I got mad. And so ESV was where I rebounded to.
You know, my transition came when I was teaching a Bible class one time, and I had a New King James Version I was reading from. And a guy put his hand up and said, that's not what my New King James says. So they went through a cycle there where they came out with revised editions, and you didn't know about it.
New King James.
Yeah. And so that helped me with the transition. And then, of course, Mark Roberts kind of pushed me a little bit the way he does a lot about the English Standard Version. So lightning round, did I say this would be quick? Okay. Favorite book outside of the Bible?
Favorite book outside of the Bible. I love the book, The 4-8 Principle. It's a little bit, it has some leanings toward kind of prosperity stuff. I don't get into any of that, but the idea of positivity from Philippians 4:8 and disciplining your thinking, it's a beautiful book. It encourages me each time I read it.
And what do you enjoy doing? Now, it's going to be running, I'm sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a runner. I don't know that I enjoy running, but I do it fairly regularly. I like it when I have finished, and like to play basketball. And like to read. That's a spare time activity for me.
Basketball, Golden State?
No, I'm a Mavs fan.
Oh, my wife is Golden State all the way. And it has to do, of course, with Curry, right? Yeah, that's what that's all about. Running, do I have this right? Were you in the Boston Marathon one year?
I was scheduled to be there. I had a spot, but then COVID happened and they canceled the race. So I still have yet to go.
Well, you got your application filled out?
I'm hoping I can get there again. We'll see.
Okay, tell us about some of the other books that you've written before exploring God's grace.
Well, the first book I wrote is called The School of Christ, and it was kind of a labor of 5 or 6 years where just trying to figure out some things to discuss about how we can develop better character and apply some of the lessons of the gospel to real living. I wrote it as sort of a newer converts type study, so we can learn this is what it means to follow Jesus and be exposed to some of his teachings. Then I wrote a book called Humility Practice, and this was a sermon that just got out of hand. At first it had 17 points, and then I just kept adding points. It got up to 27, and so it has 27 chapters. But the premise is there are some practices we have that can help us to become more humble. And as we pursue humility, it's an effort to be very practical about how we do that. I have also released a book that is like Exploring God's Grace. It's called A Year with Jesus. That is, it's devotionals, just like this one is, where each day we work through the Gospels and all 4 Gospels in different order, and just with lessons and things to pray for. And so kind of a guide to the Gospels. And now Exploring God's Grace is my 4th.
And all of these are located in a sort of a collected way on Amazon, I've noticed.
Yes.
And so people can go there and plug your name in and find all of these books. What was one of your first publishing experiences?
Well, it was unique to try to figure out how to get published. And you and I had some conversations about things early on. Do I need to seek out publishers, and who and how? And then do I need to do it myself? I think I'd like to say at this point, I've learned some things. I'm a little bit more of a veteran, but there are some parts of it where learning how to find, people to do help with the interior, help with the cover and things like that has been a little bit of a journey, and trying to figure that out. I think I've finally gotten a process down, but I think I've worn out some of the people closest to me by calling on them to be editors all the time, and then waiting with bated breath for them to finish reading through all my manuscripts. But so far, I've just done this and said, using Amazon, I'll do self-publishing. I think the idea of being able to control kind of the content and know that this is what I want it to be is helpful. But man, it's a whole world of information that I had no idea about. And so I think I still wonder how much I'm getting wrong, but at this point, I'm happy with the product.
I'll tell you one thing you're really doing right. Some of the early publishing that I did, I got in such a big hurry. You've got to, and maybe we ought to use this opportunity to tell young writers or old writers, slow down in the process. There comes a point in your writing where you get excited about seeing the final published work. And sometimes that can plug you into a rush that doesn't serve you well. And so get a good editor and good formatters, and slow down and take your time. And, if you're writing the truth will still be there in 2 years. And so you've done a good job with
Thank you.
The patience.
I'd also recommend you have somebody that can talk straight to you and that you'll listen to about your content and about the book itself. My wife is that. She never hesitates to tell me when I think she knows she's the last line of defense for the rest of the world. So she'll tell me this is not what you think it is, or this is not going like you like. And that's upsetting and hurtful a little bit when it's your project, it's your pet, but we all need that. And I think one of the dangers of self-publishing is you can rush right through all of that. As long as you think it looks okay, you can throw it out there, and that's not going to be a good thing. So, find people that'll tell you the truth.
Right. I think you need a proofreader, a formatter, and a content editor. Sometimes you think of a proofreader. What a proofreader does is usually do spell check and grammar and sentence structure. Kay Shirtliff, for example, is very good at that sort of thing with her background in English. You also need somebody who knows about formatting, interior design of a book, and then you need somebody who'll just give you straight talk about the content. And so that's you've been very good at that. So the other books you've written, we will plug into the video here in the middle, and perhaps at the end as well. Jay, take us home.
All right. Well, we highly recommend all the books that you've written. See a lot of value, and we congratulate you on all the good work you're doing. And as much as we like talking about books, we like to end our program by talking about daily Bible reading. We think that's the most important reading that people can be involved in. And so tell us something about your program. What do you do as far as daily Bible reading? The congregation, do they have a plan? So talk to us about daily Bible reading.
Yeah, so I'm not in Little Rock anymore, where we kind of established a new congregational reading here at Twin City and College Station. We're this year reading through the Psalms as a congregation, and so it's a slower reading. That's what we do with our kids and our home, is just take that as our Bible reading as a family. So that's a little bit of a different pace than I'm used to, because it's much, more focused on, we're basically doing 3 Psalms a week. So it's a little more in depth. For my personal reading, I'm a big fan of, there are so many options to have the Bible read to you. And I like those. If you go to the Apple Podcast store and just search for ESV, there are all kinds. You can get the entire ESV read to you. And then the ESV Crossway has put out several Bible reading plans. They have the McShane plan. And just every day you open podcasts and there's the day's readings. So I enjoy that. I'm working through one called Every Day in the Word right now. And so just something like that gives you some consistent things. I like to do that for, I've just noticed over the last several years that I really process things better when I'm both reading and hearing. And so, for example, I'm studying teaching Matthew in the fall. As I prep for that, I like to read Matthew and then have it, it kind of pushes me forward where I don't lock up and stop and my eyes get tired. So I recommend, if people like learning audibly, to use an audiobook like that. That's what I like to do. I also just recommend, if anybody has the Logos Bible software, it does a great job of making reading plans of whatever form, timing you like. So if you want to have read the New Testament in a month, or if you want to read Matthew in 4 days, or whatever you want to do, it can divide the Bible up for you. So I like to use those tools. I find they're a little more, they prod me a little more than just saying, okay, I'm going to look in my paper Bible every day. So that's what I like to do. But I think the main thing is, I want to spend my time daily, some of my time talking to God and some of my time hearing from God. And that if I do that, especially first thing, it sets the tone for my day. And so that's how I like to practice that.
All right. Well, we that was going to be kind of the next direction, is when do you do all this? So in the morning is when your mind's just ready to do that.
Yeah, I like having that time. Even if I'm running early in the morning, that'll be the first part of my run, and I can spend a little time chewing on things. Especially, I love having something in the Old Testament each day, because some of those stories I'm not as familiar with, or I haven't heard in a while. And just to have something like that, it's just a thought or two to spur my thinking toward God during the day.
Well, Warren, take us out.
Jacob, we really appreciate it. We really do. Not just that you've been with us in this episode, but that you've done all this writing for our benefit and for the benefit of those who read this kind of material. And hopefully this will let other people know what's out there. And maybe in group studies, some of what you've done could be valuable. Maybe as a group of people get together, certainly as families, you mentioned that. And so we appreciate what you do and what you do at the church up there and with your family. Thank you for being with us, Jacob.
Thank you so much, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, good night.